What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so one of you guys sent me a message on, or actually I think it was a YouTube comment, now that I think about it. But it was basically asking the question about like the Loki ruse from Infinity War, I guess, yeah, from Infinity War, and what role it'll play in Avengers 4. So, for those of you guys who don't know what this means, there's a fan theory that's really been running around for quite some time that Bruce Banner was actually Loki the entire time, that it was basically a big trick. I don't really think it was. I think Bruce Banner was actually Bruce Banner. Like, I think that's actually him. But there was a Reddit post, and I'll actually have the link down in the description. There was a Reddit post that offered the idea that Loki is actually alive. And the whole thing with Loki dying was basically a trick, that it was essentially a ruse, and that Loki is still very much alive and is out there somewhere. And it really kind of begs the question, if that's true, then one, where is he? And two, what's he doing? That's really kind of what this comes down to. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is Loki powerful enough to create an illusion like that? Because what you're doing is you're talking about this massive scenario unfolding whereby you have the Black Order and you have Thanos, who are all basically pummeling the Asgardians, and then you have like Loki there, and all these things taking place, and it creates an interesting scenario. Because if I were a betting man, if we had to go down this path of saying that like Loki's actually alive, then I would say that everything you saw, which is to say like the environment of the ship in Asgard, all that kind of stuff, all that stuff's there, but like Loki wasn't. That in reality, Loki actually went with Valkyrie. Like he went with them to keep them protected, because Valkyrie's powerful, but she's not that powerful. She's like below Thor, but she doesn't really have like all the magical abilities and things like that. And so Loki could just create kind of like a projection of himself that exists on the ship, and it interacts and it talks to people in the whole 9 yards. And as far as everyone's concerned, including Thor and the whole 9 yards, like it is Loki. Like Loki's basically alive. Heimdall would probably see through it, because Heimdall sees everything with his eyes. But again, if you're basically on the cusp of saying like everybody's basically dying, you're really going to be the guy who spews out, but Loki's alive. Like, I mean, I don't really, it doesn't really jive with Heimdall's character. And so with that in mind, if that's the case, let's say for example that Loki's with Valkyrie and he's with like the other surviving Asgardians, I'd have a hard time believing Loki would just be resting on his laurels, right? He's just kind of like, okay, so like, who's up for a game of poker? I don't really see, it'd be funny, and it sounds like something Loki would say, but I don't really see that being his character. Instead, I actually see Loki going out and doing things. Now, this is where things get really, really interesting for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because if we go by what we know so far, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at least Avengers 4, would be a pretty basic film, right? Like, I still stand by the idea that we're basically going to get Avengers forever. We're going to get Avengers from the past, the present, and the future, which is a way for Marvel to bring, to kind of bring back older characters. It's a way for Marvel to, of course, have some whatever surviving members of the Avengers are left, and then give us a teaser of future characters that we'll see. I'm still sticking by that theory, although I could be entirely wrong here. In all honesty, with Loki being out there, the funny thing about this is that people say, well, this was the only option that we had. This was the only choice that we had. But people assume that when Doctor Strange said that to Iron Man, that it was basically specifically for Iron Man, but like that may not be the case. It may have nothing to do with Iron Man. So if the Marvel Cinematic Universe goes with Marvel Comics, right? Like if they take this whole Marvel comic thing and they roll it in, there's a lot of different things that we could go with. For example, Loki could basically do a reverse Acts of Vengeance. For those of you guys who don't know what that is, Acts of Vengeance was like this huge story. It was like 12 or 13 issues long. Maybe it was longer than that with all the tie-ins and everything. But Acts of Vengeance was basically Old Man Logan before Old Man Logan. If you don't know what Old Man Logan is, check out the video, I'll have it down in the description. But basically, Acts of Vengeance was Loki bringing all the villains together, but it was really for the purpose of just like seeding chaos throughout the entirety of the Marvel universe, just like causing problems for villains and for heroes, because Loki was a dick. But like you could easily see him doing that, but going to the realm of Mistress Death, like going to the realm of the dead. We don't know if Mistress Death actually exists, but like if Hela is really dead and like she was the stand-in for Mistress Death, then what it means right now is the realm of the dead has no leader. There's no one running the show out there. It's just all these dead people roaming around. And it would basically mean like there's no gatekeeper. And so you could have people leave the realm of the dead. And if that's possible, Loki could just go there. Just go to the realm of hell where Hela was, and just be like, okay, so I need like Red Skull, I need this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy, like all these different people, and I need to bring them all back, and they're gonna show up for kind of like one last hurrah. They could easily go with that idea. It really kind of depends, because then if they decided they wanted to invoke the idea of death, well then you get into a whole new kettle of beans. So we've had this conversation before We've talked about this kind of thing before. So back when Thor first showed up in Marvel, when you had Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Thor made his debut in Journey into Mystery, going forward until Journey into Mystery became his own solo series, what you had was the main story itself, the main adventures of Thor, and then you had backup features, basically meaning like 4-page stories that were at the very back of the comic, that were at the very end, past like the end page for the Journey into Mystery. And these were called Tales of Asgard. And it was a way for writer, really, I guess Jack Kirby was the one who wrote it. So for writer and artist Jack Kirby to basically tell like the whole history of Asgard before Thor showed up, before Thor landed on Earth, and even some of the things that were going on in Asgard when Thor, while he was on Earth, learning who he was and discovering his powers, being a superhero, so on and so forth. So that by the time you were reading Journey into Mystery and Thor went to Asgard for the first time, you knew all this backlog, like you knew all this backstory, the origins and how the Frost Giants came into existence and how the Odin Force works and where Odin got it from and all that kind of cool stuff. And so what ends up happening here is that in this whole scenario, you just had like Hela. And that was it. And essentially the way the afterlife worked was all beings who die go to the realm of hell. The only exception to that is those who die in honorable combat, in which case Odin sends the Valkyries, they take their spirits, they bring them to Valhalla, and they spend the rest of eternity talking about how awesome it was that they cut a guy's head off once. And like that's it. Like that's all that ended up happening. Fast forward to 1968. Steve Englehart introduced Mephisto in Silver Surfer, I think. And then fast forward to 1973, when Jim Starlin introduced Mistress Death. He introduces Mistress Death in Captain Marvel number 26. And the whole basis behind this is to basically say, like, there's different afterlives now. I mean, what you end up having with the realm of Mephisto is actual hell, Hell. And it was basically a place that you go when you make a bargain with Mephisto, because then he takes your soul when you die. Then you actually have the realm of Mistress Death, the realm of death proper, which is basically where everyone goes except for those who believe in the Asgardian mythos. And then of those who believe in the Asgardian mythos, those who die in honorable combat go to Valhalla. Everybody else, they just go to hell. They just go to the realm of the dead. And even then, there's different depictions on how it's done. Like you go read Chris Claremont's Uncanny X-Men, Jean Grey is in a room with all these pillars, and you end up finding out that each pillar is an afterlife for a particular person who died. And then that was changed later on, where it turned out each one of those pillars stood for like one of the 5 billion people who were destroyed by Jean Grey when she was a Dark Phoenix. It's weird. She was the White Phoenix of the Crown, yada, 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 so on and so forth. You got to read Chris Claremont's 17-year run in order to understand it. It's kind of a crazy situation. But what this means is that for the character of Loki, there's ample places he can go to and ample locations that we can basically visit with him in order to see like the much bigger Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, aside from that, there's various other options as well. There's like the Library of Worlds that he could go to by Jonathan Hickman. We already have the Black Order. All you need now are like the Black Swans. So for those of you guys who don't know, in Marvel Comics, way back in the day, you had a villain named the Molecule Man, Owen Reese. And he was pretty straightforward. He was just a guy who had a wand and he could perform, little bits of magic and, kind of change reality on like a super small scale. So like he could turn like an apple into a teapot or something like that. And that was about the extent of it. Fast forward to 1984 when Jim Shooter wrote Secret Wars, and what you ended up finding out was that Molecule Man Owen Reese could do a whole lot more. It's just he had these mental blocks in place because he had no confidence. And so Dr. Doom basically removed those mental blocks and he was elevated to the realm of God. Fast forward 40 years or something like that, and you basically end up having Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, where you end up finding out the experiment that led to, Molecule Man getting his powers was universal across every universe. In every single universe that's ever existed in the history of Marvel Comics, Molecule Man was working for Acme Corporation, Molecule Man performed an experiment, the experiment went awry, he opened a portal to the power of the Beyonders, got one half of their power, the other half became something else, floated out there, became the Beyonder or whatever, but that always happens in every single universe. And the reason why is because the Ivory Kings, the Beyonders themselves, were actually performing this grand experiment, and they were going to detonate all the Molecule Man across the multiverse and wipe out the multiverse in its entirety. The result was that Dr. Doom figured out what was going on. They ended up killing one of the Molecule Men by accident. It created a cascading effect and the multiverse started collapsing anyway. And so it gets kind of crazy, but the fact remains here. When it comes to this whole Jonathan Hickman, the Black Order and all that kind of good stuff, you had something called the Library of Worlds. And the Library of Worlds was was literally like this dimension that was created by the Beyonders, whereby every other universe could be accessed from it, but it had different rooms inside of it. And in one room, there were no words. In another room, you had like, all this lost knowledge on magic and sorcery and all these different things. And then you had the actual private quarters of Rabu Malal himself, which turned out to be Dr. Doom. You had all these different things that took place, with this particular location. But what I'm saying here is that there's other realms and other dimensions he can visit. Like Loki could go there to the Library of Worlds and learn like, this is the one piece of magic I need in order to defeat, Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet, or to save the day, or something along those lines. My money is on the fact that Loki is actually dead. Like Loki's gone. Like I'm assuming like Loki's probably gone for forever. But again, you could also go with this. I mean, there's all kinds of options that are available to us. It could be that he's just like dimension hopping, right? Just like jumping from dimension to dimension. And we'll see like Moon Knight, and we'll see all these different, various superheroes who are out there, because Loki's been jumping from reality to reality and grabbing them. There's all kinds of scenarios that can unfold here. I mean, there's any number of things that can take place. We really don't know. I mean, literally, like I would say before Infinity War came out, I would have told you I have a pretty good idea of what direction this is going to go in. But like Infinity War ended where Infinity Gauntlet ended, basically. I mean, there's a couple things that changed. There's a couple more things, but like for the most part, if they were to take the second half, the second act of Infinity Gauntlet, and they were to turn that into Avengers 4, the movie would be over like that. It would be the quickest film ever. It would be like, and Nebula takes the gauntlet, done, and like that's it. Like that's all that you would get. But I imagine there's gonna be a whole lot more with like all these different things that go on and stuff like that. By the way, spoilers for a story that came out in 1992. So nonetheless, it is it's crazy. It's kind of wild. I mean, there's so many things that you can go with, so many things that you can do in this whole MCU, especially with Loki, because while he's not as powerful as Doctor Strange in the comics, I mean, not as powerful as classic Doctor Strange, modern day Doctor Strange definitely, like he's actually probably more powerful, to be honest, until Doctor Strange became Jesus. For those of you guys who read the most recent story by Chip Zdarsky, he basically becomes Jesus. Like he absorbs all the power of the World Tree in Asgard, and then he's just like Jesus power, and then he's just like, oh, the power of Doctor Strange compels you, and it's funny. But anyway, yeah, there's so many things that you can do here, and so many directions they can go in for the character of Loki. But again, all that hinges on the idea that Loki survived. Again, I'm going under the assumption that Loki's dead, that he's gone. Like it was a huge tragic moment, but like Loki's essentially out of the picture. He's no longer there. Because if it really was all an illusion when Loki was killed, then in reality, like he would have just kind of faded away. But then again, in the comics, when Loki casts a spell, the spell stays there so long as he wants it to, or until it gets to a point where he's so exhausted, he can't maintain it anymore. But just creating a facsimile of himself in the form of like a holographic illusion, basically, would not be that taxing. I mean, especially when you're talking about him creating like a whole set inside of his cell in Thor 2. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. I'm kind of curious. I think it's a cool theory. And I think it's a really, really good idea. And on the surface, it works. But I imagine if we were to really, really get into this and like start researching the heck out of it, we could probably find some plot holes. But at the end of the day, like I just like talking about theories. I think it's just fun to theorize about crazy ideas and topics and things like that. So anyway, guys, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.